Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. I hope you're having a good day at work, and I hope that attending this session will add good value to your work today. So, my name is Siddharth, or just Sid if that is easier, and I work at Manage Engine as a security and compliance specialist, and I will be your presenter for today's webinar. I'm also joined by our product expert, Shrikant, who has agreed to answer all your questions on the live chat. So over the course of the webinar, as and when you get any questions, feel free to reach out to us on the live chat, and either Shrikant or I will immediately try to answer your questions. But before we get started with the presentation, I just want to make sure everything is okay with the webinar setup. So I just hope you're able to view my presentation, that is my shared screen, and I hope you have no difficulties with the audio. I'm just going to pause for about 30 seconds. We still have a few more people joining in. So in case you have any difficulties, reach out to us on the live chat and we'll see what can be done to fix it. Right. So I hope everything is good. I hope you're able to view my presentation and you have no difficulties with the audio. I also just want to get a couple of housekeeping things out of the way before we get started. The first is that we will be sending you the recording of the webinar via email within a day, so you can easily share the video with your colleagues. And again, I just want to reiterate again that we are available on the live chat. So as and when you get any questions or you just want to say hi, drop in a message on the live chat so that you can engage with us. Right. So here is the agenda for today's webinar. What, of course, we're going to be talking about the GDPR and particularly about personal data and managing your personal data and the access to the personal data. So obviously the word personal data keeps coming again and again. And one of the things that I'm going to try to do over the course of the webinar is I'm going to try and bring in key ideas pertaining to the GDPR so that that will be useful for you in charting out a clear plan for the GDPR in your organization. So we had some people asking us, they wanted some of the basics of the GDPR also covered, especially with regards to managing the personal data and managing accesses to the personal data. So we'll also be going over some of those key GDPR terms and concepts as well. After which we'll be looking at how we can isolate and organize personal data that is there in our network, and then we look at ensuring proper accesses and setting up the right permissions in our Windows environment, especially because I think most of you who are attending today run on Windows environments and you depend on Active Directory. So we're going to specifically be looking at group memberships in Active Directory and why that is important. And also, we're going to be looking at efficiently managing our file server permissions, that is our NTFS permissions. I'm also going to introduce you in the end to AD Manager Plus, which is an awesome tool for managing and reporting for Active Directory. So that is our tool from Manage Engine. So I'm also going to not only show you things that you need to consider in your environment, but also provide a neat solution in the form of AD Manager Plus. Right, so that is the agenda for the webinar. So let's get started. This is the first question. So you can again answer this or not on the live chat. So what I want to ask you is how are you poised for the GDPR? Do you feel you have everything ready for the GDPR, or are you rushing to get things in place? Or is the GDPR itself a new idea to you and you are just unsure of what it entails in your organization? In case the GDPR is a new term for any of you, no worries. We have a resource that I'm going to point you to right away. This is an exclusive GDPR resource that we have created at Manage Engine. And in fact, I'm going to just send over the chat send over the link on the live chat right now. So in case any of you are totally new to the GDPR, it's not too late. You can go ahead, check out this resource that we have. It's a free resource, so you can go and get up to speed on important GDPR concepts and ideas. Right. So, but no matter how you feel about the GDPR, it is here, and the deadline is fast approaching. May 25th, 2018, which is just less than 4 months away, after which you can potentially be fined for data security negligence. This is when things get serious, because if you have a data breach, you could potentially be fined 20 million euros or 4% of your global turnover, whichever is larger. And that is a massive fine. So imagine the consequences of such a large fine being slapped on your enterprise for non-compliance. This is when things start to get real. Because in this way, what the GDPR is doing is it is forcing organizations of all sizes to implement clear-cut measures and processes for the protection of data. And this includes both collection and processing data. So now is a good time to start assessing and filling the gaps in your enterprise to ensure GDPR compliance. So a lot of people ask whether does the GDPR mean you scrap everything that you currently have and start building a new ecosystem? No, certainly not. Absolutely not. What you do need to do is tweak your existing processes, procure the right tools in case something is missing in your enterprise. You need to get the right set of tools for data security and equip your IT with the right set of tools and processes. So one example that I can give you here is when it comes to obtaining consent from a data subject for the processing of personal data. Here you have to make some tweaks to your existing consent documents and data collection policies. So let me just give you an example. I was actually just a couple of days back, I was looking at purchasing a piano on the Steinway and Sons website. So they had a guide for piano people interested in purchasing a piano, what they call the Steinway buyer's guide. So if you notice here, they have a form where they are requesting personal information such as my first name, my last name, my email ID, my phone number, and everything else. And here you can see an explicitly stated consent form right below the fields. And you can see a lot of GDPR lingo here, because while consent forms always have existed, now the GDPR expects you to be more explicit. You need to clearly tell me why I need to submit all these fields like my name and email address and so on. So here you can see it says you may withdraw your consent to our collection, use, or transfer of your personal data at any time. And this is vital because I'm the data subject in this case, and I have the right that I can withdraw this consent. It should be as easy for me to withdraw the consent as it is for me to give the consent. So here I also wanted to just click. They have a privacy policy document right here, and again, in the privacy policy document, this has clearly been tweaked by the Steinway and Sons website, because they obviously had an existing form before, but now you can see a whole bunch of GDPR lingo. So if I look at their disclosure, I see things like, I see words like personally identifiable information, personal information. In fact, if I just do a search for the word personal on this web page, it comes like about 14 times in this one little web page. So you can see, I just wanted to give this example. Of course, the GDPR doesn't end with just consent, but I just wanted to give you an example on how you should approach the GDPR. And that is really important because you need to look at tweaking the existing systems and processes that you have at the moment and look at tightening data security from all angles. So this is a pretty good example to reiterate that you should be looking at enhancing what you have in place. So let us go over a couple of key GDPR terms and concepts that you need to first understand. So these, of course, personal data, and this, of course, is the key to understand in order to start steering your enterprise toward GDPR compliance. The first and foremost idea, personal data itself, because personal data is what the GDPR is all about. This is what the fuss is all about. And according to the GDPR, they define personal data as any information relating to an identified and an identifiable natural person, which of course is the data subject. So in the case that we just saw before me jumping to Steinway and Sons website, I am the data subject in that case who is giving the personal information to the corporation, which in this case is Steinway and Sons. So here, one of the things you need to understand is that the scope of personal data has expanded under the GDPR. So you had things like name, your social security number, your phone number, and email address, and all of this was always considered personal data. But now the GDPR explicitly says, and they include your IP addresses, your cookies, your RFIDs, all these online identifiers are also now personal data. All of this is also important. And of course, you have other data. You can have your physical, genetic, mental health, economic identifiers. All of this also constitutes personal data, right? So you have to worry about all of these pieces of information in your enterprise, and securing this is the concern. So why I'm talking about this and emphasizing on this so much is because it is important for you to first define and assess the scope of personal data that your organization deals with, because this is what you need to protect. And an important point that we all have to understand is that the owner of the data is the data subject, right? And we all have to respect that. So you need to know about all the rights of the data subjects, which are actually described in the GDPR articles 12 to 20. You need to know all of this so that you can take steps to respect and protect a personal data of the data subject. So even, for example, even if you are, say, ISO 27001 compliant, there are still a few little extra things that you need to think about. So what we are going to be concerned today is obviously the protection of personal data. Personal data and its security is the key, and I cannot emphasize on this enough. And again, that is the whole objective of the GDPR. So this is a good moment to start to consider and review the different measures and processes that you have in place for data security in your enterprise. And accountability is important. This is why the GDPR has defined roles for the data controller and the data processor. This is to ensure accountability in the collection, in the processing, and also in the storage of personal data. Accountability is the key, and the data controller is the one who is accountable for GDPR in an organization. So you have to remember that the GDPR isn't something that has just come out of the blue and is just asking everyone to change everything. But what the GDPR wants is an accountable process with clear-cut measures at every stage for ensuring security of personal data, right? It's very important for us to understand this, because this way we can approach the GDPR in the way the lawmakers actually wanted it to be. Because a lot of other a lot of people and a lot of other vendors might just think GDPR is all about changing everything, bringing in a whole set of new tools. But that's not the case. You just need to look at getting a few processes in place and also a few tools perhaps to enhance what you already have in your organization so that you have a clear cut accountable process that you can show to your GDPR auditors, right? So the data controllers basically, they must ensure that everything is proper and secure in the processing of data. So this means that the controller must take appropriate measures to ensure the security of personal data at every stage. All the data processing activities must be reviewed by the controller. Which brings me to article number 24, which is a crucial aspect of the GDPR, which talks about the responsibility of the controller and the different requirements that they must meet. So you can see a big paragraph on the presentation, which talks about exactly what the controller is expected to do. But what you see in bold is the real takeaway, which says that the controller shall implement appropriate technical and organizational measures, right? The controller shall implement appropriate technical and organizational measures. So this is to ensure and to be able to demonstrate that the processing is performed in accordance with the GDPR regulation, right? You have to implement technical and organizational measures to ensure that you are protecting the data during all stages of data processing, right? So you, again, I keep coming back to this, that you have to have clear cut measures and measures that are accountable to show that you are processing data and ensuring its protection at every stage from every angle. We will be getting into more we will be getting into more all about this as we proceed. But I just wanted to mention this at this point because it's a good place to be, to first know what the compliance is expecting of you rather than just blindly changing your consent documents and procuring new security tools and things like that. I just wanted to reiterate that the mindset towards the GDPR has got to be to understand the importance of data security and then create clear cut measures that are accountable, right? So, a good starting point is understanding what personal data your enterprise deals with and where it is located on your network, right? As in where it is stored. So, what you can see on the screen right now, it says identify and isolate personal data. You need to take stock of where your organization's data is stored, as in where your organization's personal data is stored, where it is located in your network. You need to first identify that. Now, where would your data be stored? Typically, files and folders and databases, right? So that is the first thing that you need to identify. And my guess is that you probably have customer data stored in files and folders on your file servers, and you probably have some employee sensitive data stored on your databases. Both of these are important. Both of these are equally important. So you first need to identify the personal data that you deal with and then figure out how you can best segregate and isolate the personal data in your network. So this makes it easier for you to manage the personal data and, more importantly, manage the access to the personal data. So this is a new idea I'm bringing up, which is the access of personal data, right? Because a person can only do something with data if they have access to that piece of data. So one of the most fundamental steps in ensuring proper access is to first try and isolate the personal data in your network. Because once you know that, and once you have isolated where your personal data is stored, then you need to just ensure that access to the personal data is provided to only those who need it. So you should try and organize data in your network to the extent possible so that you can then efficiently grant accesses to those specific locations. This seems pretty straightforward, right? But I think you'll agree with me that this is easier said than done. However, you have to take time in doing this because it goes a long way in helping you be accountable to your auditors. Obviously, you don't want unauthorized access, and you want to ensure only the right authorized people are accessing personal data. So you must have a proper process in place for providing and reviewing accesses and permissions granted. And you have to give access to only those who actually need to access the data so that only the authorized users get access to the systems that store personal data. Which brings me to Active Directory groups. You know better than me the importance of security groups in Active Directory. Now, let me ask a few simple questions pertaining to your Active Directory environment, because this is important to efficiently manage permissions granted, and so that you know who can access a certain piece of data. So you can answer these questions, and you can some of you have already been engaging with us on the live chat, so you can answer these questions on the live chat if you wish. My first question is, do you clearly know, are you always in a position to know which users are in a particular group? Simple question. Would you know this? Would you also know which groups a particular user is a part of? And then you need to know which are the files and folders accessible by a particular account. These are basic questions, right? These questions, however basic, are very important. And I'm sure you agree with me, because you need to know these things. You need to know these things so that you can validate the accesses and permissions that have been granted to ensure that there is no unauthorized activity. This is why you must stay on top of Active Directory group membership. But reviewing and managing Active Directory groups is horrible on the native Windows technology. I have never actually met any administrator who has said they love using Active Directory users and computers. And why would anyone like it? The technology is about 18 years old, and Microsoft have couldn't be less bothered about updating Active Directory users and computers. They've not updated it in 18 years. So this means that it is for everyone worldwide, not just you, for everyone across the world using Active Directory users and computers, they have a horrible time with doing day-to-day management and administrative tasks. Here is where we provide a solution, AD Manager Plus, with which you can very easily and efficiently, in just a few clicks, manage and do your reporting for Active Directory. So here, since we're talking about um, group membership, I'm sorry, since we're talking about group membership, let me jump to the AD Manager Plus console that I have running. And I also want to encourage all of you to try and download the product, because normally in case you don't have a tool for Active Directory management and reporting, you may be struggling on Active Directory users and computers. And you probably think that it has to be that way. But the truth is, you can streamline and make all the processes a lot more efficient using a specialized tool like AD Manager Plus. And I encourage all of you to download the tool. It is very easy to set up. It is very easy to get up and running. In fact, if you download the product right now, by the time we finish the webinar, you could have at least have it up and running in your environment. So I'm going to, in fact, just send the link on the live chat. You'll be receiving the link in a moment. So I'm just going to give the free trial link. You can download this, and then you can also register for free technical support on the same page. You just have to copy paste this URL that you've just received. So you can click download, just register for free technical support. That will make things easier if you're looking to evaluate the product. So you can have the product downloaded by the time I'm done with the webinar. How cool is that? So I'm just jumping back to my installation. It's not an installation actually. In fact, if you find it difficult to download the product right now, you can just access demo.admanagerplus.com for a limited functional online demo of the product. So if that's easier for you, you can very well check this out, demo.admanagerplus.com. So I was talking about Active Directory groups. What you get with AD Manager Plus is a whole bunch of AD reports. So let me just log in because the session expired. So what you get with AD Manager Plus is a whole bunch of predefined reports that cover everything of importance in Active Directory. So here I'm looking at group reports, and I get a whole bunch of reports for groups, member-based reports, general reports, and specific group type reports like security groups. So say I'm curious about group members. I click on the group members report, and this report is automatically populated. All I need to do is select a group for which I want to check membership. Right? So say I want to check the membership for this particular group, AD Manager Test. In just one click, I can find out the users that are present in this group with all the details like the SAM account name, the department, the domain name, and everything. How easy is that? You just have to click on the report and then choose which group you want to check membership for. You don't have to struggle using the native Windows technology. You can just do this in a click using AD Manager Plus. So in this way, you can get in-depth details about group membership and any other crucial aspect in Active Directory that you're looking for. And you can periodically review all of these things by scheduling reports that can be emailed to you. Right? So this is a critical thing. You guys know it. You guys know the importance of group membership. So I just wanted to also show you an easy solution for staying on top of your group memberships and nested group memberships in Active Directory. The next concern after group membership is your file server permission management, which can get a little tricky, right? But again, you need to be on top of your NTFS permissions that have been granted to your users. So how do you manage this process of granting and managing NTFS permissions? You can tell us on the live chat. I'm sure if you're using a tool, you probably have things sorted out. But if you don't have a GUI, and if you are struggling to individually for every user assign NTFS permissions on Active Directory users and computers, I'm sure it must be quite a challenge. And not only is it a challenge, but you got to ask yourself, is it efficient and is it secure? Because again and again, using Active Directory users and computers, I'm sure we all agree, no one likes it. No one likes it because it makes routine tasks difficult. It can really get messy and become a bit of a struggle sometimes. But here with the GDPR, you also have the added responsibility of data security. So do you think using AD users and computers is going to cut it? I don't think so. And here it is very important to manage these permissions properly, because they define the data that a user can access, right? Your NTFS permissions, you have your files and folders and shares on your Active Directory that obviously could contain personal sensitive data. And you need to manage your NTFS permissions because they give access to resources to your Active Directory users, right? So the first step in file server permission management is to check the permissions that have currently been assigned. You need to first check what all permissions you have currently assigned. So again, I'm going to jump back to AD Manager Plus, go to the AD report section. You will again see that there is a whole bunch of report categories on the left pane. In this case, I'm concerned about our NTFS reports. And here you have predefined reports, shares in the servers, permissions for folders, folders accessible by accounts, and also the non-inheritable folders. How cool is that? You get all this data in one click. You have predefined reports. That is the dream, right? With this, you can review all the existing permissions that have been assigned and then decide which permissions need to be modified or revoked. And here's the best part, you can do that with the tool as well. Just like you have the AD reports tab, which I'm on, you'll also see the AD management tab here. And here is where you can assign, grant, revoke access, and your NTFS permissions. You can grant and revoke these to your users. You can do that while creating a user or while creating the users in bulk, or you can just easily modify users in a matter of clicks, right? So you can do this. Here is, of course, I'm just looking at user management, but since we were talking about NTFS, I have a section called file server management here. Over here, you can go ahead, modify NTFS permissions with ease. You get a neat user interface for you with AD Manager Plus. And here you just have to select the folders, select the permissions, apply them to folders or subfolders, allow or deny, and choose the permission. That's it. And then of course you have the option of removing existing permissions, removing existing inheritable permissions. You modify one click. You can preview it, of course, before doing it, and then modify the permissions just like that. And then once you've modified the permissions, that is once you've performed your Active Directory management task, you can jump to the reports. You can jump to the reports tab and then review and validate what you've just done. And periodically review so that you're always in control over your groups, always in control over your NTFS permissions, your file shares, and everything. So you can get reports for the shares and their permissions, and this will ensure that only the desired folders are being shared and only the right people are accessing these shares itself. So you're able to do two things. One, you're able to grant or modify or revoke permissions as required, and then you're able to review the permissions to ensure everything has been assigned properly and everything is working properly. This is fundamental to security. This is a fundamental security measure that you need to have in place for ensuring the protection of data. You need to be in a position to easily grant and revoke accesses, and then you also need to review the accesses that have been granted. That is, whatever tasks that you've performed, you need to be able to go and periodically review it, which of course is in the form of reports. So this is the two very important things that you need to remember when it comes to managing your personal data and providing access of personal data to only those who need it. So with this, I come to the end of the presentation part of the webinar. So I introduce you to AD Manager Plus, which is our tool from Manage Engine, a comprehensive tool for managing and reporting in your Active Directory. So I hope a lot of you access the link that I sent on the live chat to download the product. Maybe some of you have already completed the download and are trying to launch the product on your browser. I recommend registering for technical support, which is also free, so that you can be guided through your evaluation phase. Um, and that's about it for the presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. Do take a moment at the end of the webinar to give your feedback and let us know what you liked or didn't like during the webinar. And also let us know what you'd like to see in future webinars. It could be GDPR or any other topic as well. So let us know what you'd like to see um, in webinars in the future. And once again, we are available on the live chat. We've been answering your questions, so do keep them coming. I'm just concluding the presentation section of the webinar. You can still continue talking to us on the live chat for any queries you had about the presentation or about our product AD Manager Plus. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day ahead.